Welcome to the Vue Diagram tutorial. In this video, I will show you how to add and customize annotations and nodes and connectors in the Syncfusion Vue Diagram component. I will explain how to add annotations programmatically at runtime and update annotations at runtime. I will also explain how to customize annotations and add a hyperlink to one. First, I open my existing Vue application where I have added a diagram component with a simple flowchart to check whether a number is even or odd. I have added nodes and connectors to the diagram without annotations. To learn more about integrating the diagram component into a Vue application, please check the Getting Started video linked in the card above and in the description below. Let me run this application using the command npm run dev. The diagram canvas is rendered with defined nodes and connectors for the flowchart. To add an annotation to a node, I can double-click the node and add the annotation. Or I can select the node and press the F2 button on the keyboard to add the annotation. I can add annotations for the connectors in the same ways. Next, I will show you how to add annotations to nodes and connectors programmatically. In the Nodes collection, in the Start Node object, I add the Annotations property and set an array of objects. I add the Content property and set the value to Start. I can add more annotation objects to the node if I need to. I do the same for all the other nodes. I save the file. You can see the annotations in the nodes. I now want to add an annotation to this third connector and to the fourth connector. So, in the Connectors collection, in the DecisionToProcessEven connector object, I add the Annotations property, assign a collection of objects, and set the content to true. Similarly, to the DecisionToProcessOdd connector, I add an Annotation property with the content false. Now you can see the annotations for the two connectors. To enhance the clarity of connector annotations and eliminate the overlapping line, I will apply a background color. To do so, in the connectors annotation, I add this style property and set the fill property to white. I add the same style for the other connector annotation. Now you can see the connector annotations more clearly. Next, I'll show you how to programmatically add annotations at runtime using the mounted function. First, in the diagram component, I add the ref attribute and assign the value diagram object. This is done to access the diagram component directly from the script. Within the script tag, I declare a diagram instance variable. To define this diagram instance variable in the export default statement, I use the mounted function and define the diagram instance by accessing the $ref subject. I assign the diagram objects, e.g. 2 instances. Using this diagram instance, I can access the diagram component related properties. To add annotations to a node, I use the diagram instance and call the addLabels method by passing the node object as a parameter and by passing the annotation content. This statement will add an annotation to the fourth node. Similarly, add annotation to the fourth connector. Here, I need to pass the connector object and the content. Since I have added the annotations here in the connectors collection for the DecisionToProcessOdd connector, I block the annotation statement. I do the same for the ProcessEven node. Now you can see the node annotation and the connector annotation are added programmatically at runtime. Next, I'll show you how to update annotations at runtime using the mounted function. Within the mounted function, I use the diagram instance nodes property and access the third index's annotations collection and the 0th index annotation content. I set the updated node annotation. I do the same for the connectors annotation too. In the diagram canvas, you can see the updated annotations in the fourth node and in the fourth connector. Next up, I'll show you how to customize the annotations. First, I will show you how to align the node annotations using the offset property. Look at this image. It represents different offset values in which the node annotations can be positioned. 0, 0 represents the top left corner, 1, 1 represents the bottom right corner, and 0.5 signifies the midpoint along any line in the node. You can set any fractional value between 0 and 1 for the x and y properties. To show the annotation in the top left corner, I need to set the offset values of x and y to 0. So, in the input node object, add the offset property and set the x property with value 0 and y property with value 0. In the mounted function, I block the annotation update code for better clarity in the flowchart. In the diagram canvas, you can see the input node annotation is set at the top left corner of the node. To align the connector annotation using the offset property, I go to the connectors collection. In the decision to process even connector annotations property, I define the offset property with the value 0. You can also set the value to 1 or any fractional value between 0 and 1. Since connectors are one-dimensional geometric objects, they only need one axis value to align. You can see in the decision to process even connector annotation, true is aligned at the 0th position of the connector. You can also align the connector annotation using the alignment property. It allows you to align the annotations by center before and after. The default value is center. Let me use them in the connectors. In the decision to process even connector annotations property, I define the alignment property with the value before. I block the offset property for better clarity in viewing the alignment property changes. In the decision to process odd connector, unblock the annotations property and define the alignment property with the value after. In the mounted function, block the add labels statement for the connector since we have added the same at the connector's property level. I save the file. You can see the annotations before the connector and after the connector. Notice the annotations are very close to the connectors. To further adjust the positions of the connector annotations from their current locations, I can use the displacement property. In the connector annotations, I define the displacement property with x and y axis values of 5 pixels. I do the same for the other connector annotation too. Now you can see that both annotations are displaced 5 pixels from the connectors. Similarly, I can align the nodes too. For nodes, I can set the horizontal and vertical alignment. They support the combination values of left, right, top, bottom, and center. The default value of both horizontal and vertical alignment is center. Now I will demonstrate how to align an annotation to the top left of the node when the offset value is set at 0, 0. In the input node's annotations collection, I have already set the offset value to 0, 0. Now I define the vertical alignment with the value top and the horizontal alignment with the value left. In the diagram canvas, you can see the node annotation is positioned at the top left. Next, I'll show you how to wrap the annotations in the node. To do so, in the node object within the annotations property, I define the style property and set the text wrapping property with the value wrap. I can also set the values no wrap and wrap with overflow. Wrap with overflow is the default value for the text wrapping property. I set the width property to the annotation so that we can see the text wrapping effects in the node. I block the offset and alignment properties too. Since the text strapping property and other upcoming property explanations are similar for both nodes and connectors, I won't demonstrate them for connector annotations. You can see the text wrapped in the input node in the diagram canvas. Using the same style property, I can customize the annotation fonts too. To do so, in the annotation style property, define the font family as Times New Roman and set the font size to 14. You can see the modified font style for the annotation in the node. Next, I'll show you how to interact with the diagram annotations. First, I need to use the constraints property. The constraints property allows us to select, drag, rotate, and resize the annotations and make them read only. To enable annotation interaction, first I import the annotation constraints module from the J2 Vue Diagrams package. Then, in the node's annotations property, I define the constraints property and set the value to interaction. You can select the annotation in the diagram canvas, drag it, resize it, and rotate it. To prevent editing of the annotation in the constraints property, I set the value to read only. Now I cannot select or edit the annotation in the node. Finally, I'll explain how to add a hyperlink to the annotation. In the annotation object, I add the hyperlink property and set an object with a content property with a value. This will be displayed in the node. I define the link property with a valid URL. I then define the hyperlink open state property with the value current tab. I can also set the value to new tab or new window. I block the width statement so that hyperlink content will be visible more clearly. I save the file. You can see the hyperlink. When I click on it, it opens the provided URL in the current tab as expected. That's how easy it is to add annotations to nodes and connectors in the Syncfusion Vue Diagram component. You have seen in this video how to align and position the annotations using the offset, horizontal alignment, vertical alignment, and hyperlink properties. Additionally, you have learned how to customize the appearance of the annotations by setting text wrapping and font styles. You can download the example used in this video from the GitHub link in the description below. I've also included a link where you can check whether you're eligible for our community license, which gives you a free license key for our entire Vue suite. If you found this video useful, click the like button and subscribe to our channel to get notifications about new videos. Thanks for watching.